Well, good morning, Redeemer Bible Church. My name is Jason Stinson. I'm one of your pastors here at the church, and this is the Daily Word. And today we are in just an amazing chapter of the Bible, probably one of my favorite chapters of all of the Bible, and that's Matthew chapter 16. This is a chapter that even for my own wrestling with my faith when I was younger really was kind of the defining chapter for my own life in my own testimony of becoming a Christian. And there's just so much rich truth here. We're coming into a chapter here where Jesus' ministry is really starting to take a turn to focus on the disciples and to be getting them ready for the task that he has for them with building the church, with explaining to them even furthermore that he isn't here to build an earthly kingdom, but a heavenly kingdom, and that they are going to be a very important part of building that, the foundation of building that church. And he starts to talk to them about his real true purpose for being here with dying on the cross and his purpose for coming here to die. And they're not fully understanding that yet, but it's just an amazing chapter where we see a lot of awesome theological truths. And so we're just going to kind of take a look at this here. Going to go through this kind of as quick as I can, but it is again just a loaded up chapter. It's just so awesome. So I would say that as much as you enjoy just this little bits and pieces that I pull out here in the Daily Word, this is something that you'd want to like read and meditate on for a long time and really soak in all that the Word would have for you here in this chapter. But let's just go ahead and read together here right away when we start this chapter here in verses 1 through 12. You're gonna notice something, that it talks about two kinds of spiritually blind people. And those two kinds of people are, there's people that will never, their eyes will never be open. They will always be spiritually blind. And then there's those that the Lord will open up their eyes, that they will come to see who Christ is. And so obviously the big difference between those people is what the question of who Jesus Christ really is, how they answer that question, whether they stay spiritually blind or not. So let's just take a look at this. And here we go. We're starting back up again with the Pharisees, and this time it says that right in verse 1 here. Let's just read this here. And the Pharisees and the Sadducees came to test him, and they asked him to show them a sign from heaven. So just right off the bat, it's interesting here because the Pharisees and the Sadducees got together. And if you know any of the history on that, for them to get together on anything, this group of people that pretty much, didn't get along at all. It would be like Republicans and Democrats getting together to be able to, on a common cause. And this was a common enemy. And their common enemy was Jesus Christ. So they came together for this. And then it's just funny that it says they asked him to show them a sign from heaven, because Jesus Christ literally was a sign from heaven. But they're spiritually blind and they don't see it. So they go on with their own earthly wisdom here, and they say, Jesus answered them, "When it is evening, you say it will be fair weather, for the sky is red. In the morning, it will be stormy today, for the sky is red and threatening. You know how to interpret the appearance of the sky, but you cannot interpret the signs of the times. An evil and adulterous generation seeks for a sign, but no sign will be given to it except the sign of Jonah." So he left them and departed. And so he basically makes a point to let them know that they can, whatever rudimentary or crude way they have of like understanding the weather, they can understand these things, but they cannot understand spiritual things at all. They are completely blind to it. And it's just a really sad point on who these people are and how they are people that will never really see. And so right after that, he starts talking to the disciples here, and he says this starting in verse 5. When the disciples reached the other side, they had forgotten to bring any bread. And Jesus said to him, "Watch and beware of the leaven of the Pharisees and the Sadducees." And they began discussing it among themselves, saying, "We brought no bread." So right off the bat here, they don't really understand what he's saying. They're thinking about bread whenever he's talking about, he's trying to give them obviously speak spiritually to them about the lies and the deception of the Pharisees and the Sadducees, and it's just kind of immediately kind of lost on them what he's trying to say. And then verse 8 here says, "But Jesus, aware of this, said, 'O you of little faith, why are you discussing among yourselves the fact that you have no bread? Do you not yet perceive? Do you not yet remember the 5 loaves for the 5,000 and how many baskets you gathered? Or the 7 loaves for the 4,000 and how many baskets you gathered? How is it that you fail to understand that I did not speak about bread?'" And so here, it's just a reminder to all of us, just even how lost we can even be, even to spiritual things, how often we forget, how often that we know. We can have, like the disciples here, they had been with Christ. They had seen him do so many things. They had already known that he speaks to them in spiritual ways many times, and yet that just goes completely past them. And here they are thinking that he's just talking about bread, and they're like, we don't have any bread, and starting to even like maybe even worry about that, even knowing full well that they don't need to worry or even think about bread, like that they've already seen Christ do miraculous things. But here, of course, he's speaking about spiritual things, and they just don't get it at all, and their minds go to things that are not even worth thinking about, because they have Christ who can do all things. And so here in verse 11, "So how is it that you fail to understand that I did not speak about bread? Beware of the leaven of the Pharisees and the Sadducees." Verse 12, "Then they understood that he did not tell them to beware of the leaven of the bread, but the teaching of the Pharisees and Sadducees." So again, it's a reminder to us to understand that we are forgetful people. We are people that we need to constantly be in the Word, seeking after spiritual wisdom, and not just the things that are around us, and to be constantly looking at what the Lord is teaching us through promises, through things he's already done for us in our lives, or how he's already provided for us, how he's already cared for us, and to be thinking and asking God really daily for wisdom, and to be following after the Lord, and to understand what he's trying to teach us in all things. And here, I think, right here, starting at verse 13, this is, I think, one of the most important passages in all of the Bible. Again, in my own testimony, as I was growing up, and when I was, coming off of, is this really my faith, or is it just my parents' faith, I came across this passage here, where the question is asked, "Who do you say that I am?" And this is the most important question in all of the Bible. So I'm going to read this here. And the question is of serious importance, of most importance, and the answer, of course, is of most importance, in the sense when we realize that of those 2 different people I mentioned before, those that are spiritually blind, those that will always be blind, that will never see, and those that will. Why will they see? Why was I able to have faith? Why can several people hear a gospel message all at the same time, and one will believe and the other ones won't? Well, the answer to that is here in our passage right here, starting at verse 13. So now when Jesus came into the district of Caesarea Philippi, he asked his disciples, "Who do people say that the Son of Man is?" And they said, "Some say John the Baptist, others say Elijah, and others Jeremiah or one of the prophets." All of those being, amazing men of the Bible, complimentary for sure, that anybody would be one of those things. But uniquely, Jesus Christ is so much more than these men were. Even as prophets and spiritually wise men that these were, Jesus was uniquely greater, obviously. So he says to them, verse 15, he said to them, "But who do you say that I am?" And then verse 16, Simon Peter replied, "You are the Christ, the Son of the living God." And Jesus answered him, "Blessed are you, Simon Bar-Jonah," or Simon, son of Jonah. He says, and now, listen to this. This is crucial that you hear this. "That for flesh and blood has not revealed this to you, but my Father who is in heaven." And so here we have this amazing truth, that flesh and blood, that just normal, understanding or logic is not going to allow us to understand who Jesus Christ really is, as being the Lord, the Christ, the Son of the living God. But it is our eyes being opened up by the Father in heaven, by Christ himself, opening our eyes that we would be able to know who he is, that we could be ones that could be, though we were blind, that our spiritual eyes could be open to that truth. And so without the Lord opening up our eyes to understand that, we would be like the Pharisees and the Sadducees. We would be completely and totally blind. So what an amazing truth that is, that that when we can confess who Christ is, that Jesus is the Son of God, that if we understand that to be true, that our eyes have been opened by the Father to understand that truth. And just what an amazing thing that is, very theologically rich. And so verse 18, he says this here, and this starts a passage here that has been really kind of twisted and messed up throughout time. And a lot of people have said a lot of goofy things about this, like maybe even saying that Peter was the first pope because of this. But it's, I'm not going to get completely into this, but it'll be important for us to understand kind of the main thing that's being said here. So let's just read here, verse 18. It says, "And I tell you, you are Peter, and on this rock I will build my church, and the gates of hell shall not prevail against it. I will give you the keys of the kingdoms of heaven, and whatever you bind on earth shall be bound in heaven, and whatever you loose on earth shall be loosed in heaven." Then he strictly charged the disciples not to tell anyone that he was the Christ. And so here, there's a lot of things going on here, and Peter's name kind of meant the stone, and then he says, on this rock, on this massive truth, that I am the Christ. While using you, I will build my church. And so what he's basically saying here in this whole passage, there's a lot, we could take this whole thing apart forever, but I don't have time to do that. But what really is being said here is Jesus is proclaiming the unique role of the apostles, and they're building the foundations of the church. And really that's what we're seeing here, that they will have a unique role in the building of the church. And when it talks about binding and loosing in heaven, he's giving them a special commissioning to teach the authority of salvation. And so like I said, there's a lot that could be said about all of this part, and people have torn this part forever, but the main thing of that is their unique role in the building of the church. So we'll just kind of stick with that there, and then we'll go to this next section here. So starting at verse 21. So here, now they haven't really, they're just, grasping who Christ really is. As Jesus asked them who he is, as they're seeing him through his ministry and his work, and now we see the shift from the crowds to specifically preaching and preparing the disciples for what Jesus actually came for, and that was for dying on the cross. So here, he starts to teach about why he has come, why he is here, why his purpose. And so this will be very confusing for them, as you'll see, and Peter doesn't understand what he's saying at all, and they still think he's coming to build an earthly kingdom here, but he is not. And so it's important for us to understand the main thing here is that there is no Christianity without the cross. There are no Christians without the cross. So keep that in mind as I read this here. Verse 21. "From that time Jesus began to show his disciples that he must go to Jerusalem and suffer many things from the elders and the chief priests and scribes, and be killed on the third day and be raised." So he tells his purpose for why he's actually come. In verse 22, "And Peter took him aside and began to rebuke him, saying, 'Far be it from you, Lord, this shall never happen to you.' But he turned and said to Peter, 'Get behind me, Satan. You are a hindrance to me, for you are not setting your mind on the things of God, but the things of man.'" And so Jesus here, he rebukes Peter, because Jesus' death was part of God's sovereign plan, and that for Peter to speak out against the will of God is a blasphemous thing. So he rebukes Peter, and basically says, you have no understanding of the fact of why I'm really here. And even though you just gave this great proclamation that I am the Christ and you have understanding here, you have no understanding, and that what you're saying actually comes against the sovereignty of the will of the Father. And so do not speak out against the sovereignty and the will of the Father. And there's so much more to be said in that, but I'm going to leave it at that. And then we get to this last section here, where take up your cross and follow Jesus. And I'm just going to read this here, and I have a couple things to say about that, and we can close for the day. But it says, so after that, after his teaching of that he has come to not build an earthly kingdom, but actually to suffer and to die for the sins of his people, he says, then he told his disciples, again, he's starting to teach his disciples, prepare them for the work that he has in their life of building the church. And he says, if anyone would come after me, let him deny himself, take up his cross and follow me. For whoever would save his life will lose it, but whoever loses his life for my sake will find it. For what will it profit a man if he gains the whole world and forfeits his soul? Amazing words, amazing familiar things that we've heard. But for Christians and for us, just really truths that we need to really hang our hat on. For the Son of Man is going to come with his angels in the glory of his Father, and then he will repay each person according for what he has done. Talking about the judgment. Truly I say to you, there are some standing here who will not taste death until they have seen the Son of Man coming in his kingdom. So what he's talking about here at the very end is what we're about to our next video will be on, and that's in chapter 17 when he's talking about the transfiguration. That word kingdom there can literally mean man coming in his royal splendor. And the some who are standing that will not taste death until they see the Son of Man coming in royal splendor. He's talking about Peter, James, and John, which we're going to see in in chapter 17. But I think for this take up your cross thing, we've heard this before. There's been so many different things said about this. But really, this is what we need to understand. This is how I'm going to close our daily word here today, is that we as Christians, we have a daily cross, right? Every day when we wake up as Christians, as those that want to follow Jesus, we realize that just as Jesus was teaching, this is not our earthly home. This is not our place. We have a different kingdom, and we live as people that die to ourselves, that we take up our cross daily, that we must crucify our flesh daily. We must resist the devil daily. We must overcome the world daily, and that there is a battle to be fought daily. And in order to do that, we have to understand who Jesus Christ is, the purpose why he came, our purpose for our lives, laying down our own life to follow Christ, and to understand that this life will come with suffering and persecution for following Christ, and that it's not just about us, but we have to crucify our flesh daily. So that is the daily word for today, and we have chapter 17 coming up tomorrow. So we'll see you then. Thank you.